The security guard's hands were rough as he grabbed Margaret's thin shoulders. "Get out!" he yelled. "We don't serve your kind here." Every eye in the fancy restaurant turned to watch. Rich customers whispered behind their wine glasses. Some laughed. Margaret's worn coat dragged on the marble floor. Her old shoes squeaked as she stumbled toward the door. But as she reached for the golden handle, something caught her eye. A small brass plaque by the entrance. Most people walked right past it. Margaret stopped. She read the words slowly. Her weathered face went pale. Her hands started shaking. The restaurant owner, Vincent Rossetti, watched from behind the bar. He smirked at his security guard. "Problem solved," Vincent muttered. But Margaret turned around. Her eyes were different now, fierce, determined. She pulled something from her coat pocket. A faded photograph. Vincent's smirk disappeared. "You made a big mistake," Margaret whispered. But then she noticed something no one else did. Margaret Chen was 72 years old. She lived in a tiny apartment above the laundromat. For 30 years, she cleaned office buildings at night. Every penny went to her grandson, Tommy's medical bills. Tommy had been in a wheelchair since the accident. The insurance company refused to pay for his surgery. Margaret needed $12,000. Fast. That's why she came to Rossetti's tonight. Not to eat, to remember. Vincent Rossetti owned half the restaurants in the city. His father built the family empire from nothing. Or so everyone believed. Vincent drove a Ferrari. He wore $1,000 suits. He treated poor people like dirt. They dragged down the neighborhood, he always said. Tonight, Margaret had tried to tell him the truth about his restaurant, about his family. He threw her out instead. But Margaret had been keeping a secret for 50 years, a secret that could destroy Vincent's perfect life. She clutched the old photograph tighter. The brass plaque by the door held the key to everything. Inside the restaurant, Vincent's customers returned to their expensive meals. "Who was that woman?" asked Mrs. Whitman, the mayor's wife. "Nobody important," Vincent said. "Just another beggar looking for handouts." He straightened his silk tie. The dining room was full of the city's most powerful people. "This restaurant has been in my family for 60 years, Vincent announced. "My father built it with his bare hands." Everyone nodded and smiled. But Margaret pressed her face against the window. She heard every word. Her hands shook with anger. She pulled out her phone, called her grandson. "Tommy," she whispered, "I need you to look something up in your grandfather's old papers." "Grandma, are you okay? You sound upset. Just trust me. Look for anything about Chen's Kitchen from 1963. Margaret hung up. She stared at the brass plaque one more time. It read, "Rossetti's Family Restaurant, established 1963, built on the foundation of family values and hard work." Margaret laughed bitterly. "Family values," she muttered. "We'll see about that." But Vincent was already making calls. He had resources, money, power. If the old woman wanted a fight, he'd give her one. "Prove it," he had said when she tried to tell her story. Now she would. Margaret took the bus home. Her apartment was cold and dark. She opened an old shoebox under her bed. Inside were dozens of letters, receipts, photographs. Her husband had saved everything before he died. "Help me, David," she whispered to his picture. Meanwhile, Vincent called his lawyer. "I need you to research someone," he said. "Margaret Chen, old Chinese woman, lives downtown." "What's she done?" "She's telling lies about my family. I want her stopped." Vincent poured himself whiskey. His office walls were covered with awards and photos. Every picture showed the same story. his father, Antonio Rossetti, building the restaurant empire. But Margaret was looking at different pictures. In her shoebox was a photo of a young Chinese couple. They stood in front of a small restaurant. The sign above the door read Chen's Kitchen. The man wore a chef's hat. The woman held a baby. Margaret touched the woman's face. "That's me," she whispered. "And that's your grandfather, Tommy." She flipped the photo over. Written in faded ink, Chen's Kitchen, grand opening, May 15th, 1963. The same year Rossetti's opened. Margaret's heart pounded. She grabbed her phone again. "Tommy, did you find anything?" "Grandma, you need to see this. I found Grandpa's old business license." Margaret smiled for the first time in hours, but she didn't know Vincent's lawyer was already digging into her past. The hunt was on. Tommy wheeled himself into Margaret's apartment. His laptop bag hung from his wheelchair. "Grandma, look at this." He opened his computer, showed her scanned documents. Grandpa owned Chen's Kitchen, but look at this. A legal notice from 1963. Property seized for non-payment of taxes. Margaret's face went white. "We never owed taxes. Your grandfather paid everything on time." Tommy scrolled down. "But look who bought the property the next day." The buyer's name, Antonio Rossetti. "For half the market price," Margaret whispered. She remembered now. The night they lost everything, men in suits came to the restaurant. They had papers, badges. "You owe the city money," they said. "Pay up or get out." But David had shown them receipts, proof of payment. "Sorry," they said. "Our records show different." The next morning, Chen's Kitchen was gone. Antonio Rossetti's sign went up that afternoon. "There's more," Tommy said. He showed her newspaper clippings from 1963. City official arrested for bribery. Tax department scandal rocks City Hall. Records destroyed in mysterious fire. Margaret connected the dots. They were all working together, she said, but she still needed proof. Real proof. "Tommy, we need to find someone from back then, someone who remembers." At his mansion, Vincent reviewed his lawyer's report. Margaret Chen, age 72, widowed, one grandson, financial problems. Vincent smiled coldly. "Perfect, she's desperate for money. Everyone will think she's lying for a payout." But his lawyer had found something else. "Mr. Rossetti, there's something odd about 1963. I can't find your father's original business license." Vincent's smile faded. "What do you mean?" "The file is missing from city records, along with several other documents from that year." Vincent's hands trembled slightly. Maybe the old woman wasn't lying after all, but he couldn't let that matter now. There were two people who knew the truth about 1963. One was Margaret Chen. The other was Vincent's own uncle, Frank Rossetti. And Frank had been very quiet about the old days lately. Frank Rossetti lived in a penthouse across town. He was Vincent's father's brother, and he had been Vincent's business partner for 40 years. Margaret knocked on his door at 9 p.m. "We need to talk," she said. Frank was 78. His hands shook as he opened the door. "Margaret, is that really you? You remember me?" Frank's shoulders sagged. "I've been waiting for this day for 50 years. He let her inside. His apartment was filled with guilt and secrets. "I was there that night," Frank said, "when they took your restaurant." Margaret sat down. Her heart pounded. "I drove the car. My brother Antonio was in the back seat with the city inspector. You helped them steal from us." Frank nodded. His eyes filled with tears. "Antonio said it was just business, said Chinese immigrants couldn't own prime real estate. We were American citizens." I know," Frank buried his face in his hands. But I was young, stupid, greedy. Margaret pulled out her photograph. This is what they stole from us. Our life, our dream. Frank looked at the picture of Chen's kitchen. Your husband made the best dumplings in the city. People lined up around the block, and you destroyed it all. Frank walked to his safe, pulled out a metal box. I kept these, he said, evidence of what we did. Inside were documents, photos, recorded conversations, proof of the conspiracy. Why? Margaret asked. Because I knew someday I'd have to make it right. But Frank had a bigger secret. Vincent doesn't know the truth about his father. He thinks Antonio was a hero. Margaret realized the stakes had just gotten higher. This wasn't just about her family anymore. It was about destroying Vincent's entire world. And Frank Rossetti was the key to everything. But outside, a car was parked in the shadows. Vincent's security team was watching. The next morning, Margaret found a lawyer's letter under her door. Cease and desist. Stop spreading false information about the Rossetti family. Tommy wheeled over. Grandma, they're trying to scare you. Margaret crumpled the letter. Let them try. But Vincent wasn't finished. He called the landlord of Margaret's building. I hear you have a troublemaker in 4B, Margaret Chen. She's been a good tenant for 20 years. Not anymore. I have it on good authority she's been selling drugs. It was a lie, but Vincent had friends everywhere. Give her 30 days to leave. That afternoon, Margaret got an eviction notice. Tommy was furious. This is illegal. We should call the police. The police won't help us, Margaret said. Vincent owns too many people. But Margaret had made her decision. Frank Rossetti had given her the evidence. Now she needed a stage. Tomorrow night was the City Business Awards. Vincent was getting a Lifetime Achievement Award. The mayor would be there, the press, the whole city elite. It's time to show the world, Margaret said. But Vincent had one more card to play. He called Frank that evening. Uncle, I know about your visitor last night. Frank's blood went cold. Vincent, I can explain. You're either with family or you're against us. Choose carefully. Frank hung up the phone. His hands shook as he looked at Margaret's number. He had to warn her. But when he tried to call, the line was dead. Vincent's people had cut her phone. The grand ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers. 500 of the city's most powerful people filled the room. Vincent stood at the podium. His tuxedo was perfect. His smile was confident. Ladies and gentlemen, the Rossetti family has served this city for 60 years. In the back of the room, Margaret appeared. She wore her best dress. It was old but clean and pressed. Security guards stepped forward. Vincent had given them her photo, but Frank Rossetti stood up from his table. She's my guest, he announced. The guards stopped. Vincent's eyes went wide. Margaret walked down the center aisle. Every head turned to watch. She reached the stage. Vincent's voice cracked on the microphone. Sir, this is a private event. 60 years ago, Margaret said loudly, my husband and I owned a restaurant. The crowd murmured. Chen's Kitchen. We served the best food in Chinatown. Vincent tried to continue his speech, but Margaret kept talking. Until the Rossetti family stole it from us. The room went silent. Margaret pulled out her old photograph. This is proof. Chen's Kitchen opened May 15th, 1963. She held up Vincent's own awards. The same day Rossetti's mysteriously acquired our property. Vincent grabbed the microphone. This woman is lying. Security. But Frank Rossetti walked to the stage. She's telling the truth, he said into the microphone. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Frank opened his metal box. "I have documents, photos, proof of what we did." Vincent's face went red with rage. "Uncle, you're confused. You're old." "I'm a criminal," Frank shouted. "And so was your father." The crowd erupted, cameras flashed. Vincent lunged for the microphone. "This is all lies. My family built this business, honestly." But his voice carried through the speakers. What he didn't know was that his microphone was still on. The sound technician had forgotten to cut the audio. Vincent thought he was whispering to his lawyer. But everyone in the room heard him say, "Get the documents from my safe. Burn everything from 1963. Make sure the old woman has an accident on her way home." The ballroom fell silent. Vincent realized his mistake. 500 witnesses, live television coverage. His confession was broadcast to the entire city. Vincent was arrested that night. The FBI raided his restaurants the next morning. They found more evidence in his safe. 50 years of corruption, bribes, stolen properties, not just from Margaret's family, from dozens of immigrant families. Frank Rossetti cooperated with authorities. He was sentenced to house arrest due to his age, but he gave every penny of his fortune to the victims. Margaret stood in front of the empty building that used to be Chen's kitchen. The city had given her the deed, free and clear. Tommy wheeled up beside her. "What are you going to do with it, Grandma?" Margaret smiled. She pulled out her husband's old recipes. "We're going to rebuild. Make the best dumplings in the city again." 6 months later, Chen's kitchen reopened. The line stretched around 3 blocks. Margaret hung her husband's photograph by the door. Below it, a brass plaque. Chen's Kitchen, established 1963, rebuilt 2024, where truth always comes first. Vincent Rossetti got 10 years in federal prison. His restaurants were sold to pay back the families he had cheated. Margaret used her settlement money for Tommy's surgery. He walked into Chen's kitchen on opening day, for the first time in 8 years. "Grandma," he said, "Grandpa would be proud." Margaret touched the brass plaque. She remembered Vincent's words from that first night. "We don't serve your kind here." Now she served everyone, rich and poor, all colors, all backgrounds. Because the truth had a longer memory than hatred, and justice, like her grandmother's dumplings, was always worth the wait. Wealth can buy silence, but it can never bury the truth forever. And sometimes the smallest voice carries the greatest power.